and bow legs. And at least in my culture growing up, bow leg was a sign of beauty for both men and women. So if there was Tinder back then, you would have been saying, I'm a nice bow-legged man, and blah, 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 blah. So that's part of the big picture. It was a big impact. And we'll talk about why, especially among black people, among darker skinned people. We're also going to talk about how the calcium stat affected not only sort of local history and culture, but affected, this is a hormone that impacted human evolution. We already talked about how hormones impacted the history of Africa. Now we're talking about entire evolutionary trajectories of humans. So last year, this was published in Science, and it was a depiction of what the first Europeans may look like. So of course, Homo sapiens, our species, evolved in Africa around the equator, and darker skin blocked out UV light. But when people migrated, when Homo sapiens migrated into Europe, there was an evolution of lighter skin due to a hormone. In fact, this is a Neanderthal. So the Neanderthals that had walked out of Africa prior to Homo sapiens were the first to develop a mutation or evolve a mutation for red hair and lighter skin. If you're European or Asian, you're probably 4% Neanderthal, because we now know that Homo sapiens interbred with the Neanderthals. But the red hair gene and the lighter skin mutations that were in Neanderthal aren't the same ones that make Asians and Europeans like that gene evolved a second time, but some of those traits were picked up by Neanderthals. So that's like the big picture story. So you're going to learn about why bow leg, well, maybe not why it was considered attractive, but why it was an issue when I was growing up. Not so much now anymore. You're going to learn about a hormone that affected human evolution. And you're going to learn about the big lie that is vitamin D. Vitamin D gives you strong bones, right? Vitamin D can care less about your bones. That's what you're going to learn today. In fact, vitamin D causes you to lose bone. 5 big lies. 1, vitamin D is not a vitamin. 2, vitamin D is not a hormone. 3, vitamin D is not a steroid. 4, vitamin D does not promote strong bones. And 5, the vitamin D that's in your milk and foods that's added in is not really vitamin D. Whew, is that enough lies for one day? All right. So history, culture, human evolution, and some big lies. I'm just trying to make what I think is a pretty boring topic interesting for you. Because vitamin D don't cut it for me. So here's what we're going to talk about today, though. We're going to focus on the bone, but the majority of the hormones in your body care less about your bone. As far as PTH and vitamin D are concerned, your bone is just a reservoir for calcium. It could care less how much is in your bone. But we'll see why vitamin D has this reputation. So when we talk about bone today, we're talking about something different than we talked about before. Before we talked about bone growth, meaning linear growth at the growth plate. That was all the growth hormone, IGF-1, chondrocyte. But I want you to keep that in the back of your mind for context. Because at this part of the course, you should be thinking about how all of these things are connected. Because the bone can't grow linearly. Well, you saw what happened. If the bone goes linearly and it's not being fortified with calcium, you just saw 2 extreme examples. So we're not talking about linear growth today. We will at the end of the lecture. If I take a cross-section of bone, what we're talking about now, today, is sort of the width, the girth, the strengthening of the bone by calcium, not the linear increase in the bone. There's a battle in your bones. Today is the story of the battle of the bones. Does that get you excited? Something's got to get you excited about calcium. So we got it. There's 2 types of cells in your bone that maintain calcium. But again, none of the hormones care about your bone except that it's a reservoir, it's a bank for calcium. Because if calcium is too low in the blood, you will die. That's why those hormones take it out of your bones if you don't have enough. Or you get rickets and knock you. Remember all the things we talked about that calcium does? Your nerves couldn't fire without calcium. You couldn't get release of membrane of vesicles. All of those hormones that get released, remember the vesicles bind and get released? That all requires calcium. Remember all those voltage-gated calcium channels? Your heart couldn't beat without calcium. You have to have calcium in your bone. Without calcium, severe calcium depletion will give you tetanus and you will die. That's what your hormones care about. Over time, too much calcium is bad as well. Right? You can get calcifications in your soft tissues. You can get calcification in your joints. So a lot of athletes who took anabolic steroids, they get converted into estrogen and it causes calcium to precipitate and calcify your joints. You get bad joint problems. You get kidney stones. Not the kind that I had, mine were uric acid, but you get kidney stones if there's too much calcium. So it has to be regulated. You have to maintain calcium homeostasis. The main reservoir for calcium is bone. And there are two types of cells battling in your bone for your calcium. One are the osteoblasts. And the osteoblast, who gave me my mnemonic last time about the ether? This one works. The osteoblast, OB, not to be confused with the Korean beer. Or I think there's a feminine product also called OB, not to be confused with that either. The osteoblasts are the cells that build bone. They're inside your bone and they build bone. What the osteoblasts do, and there's some confusing language, is the osteoblasts create an alkaline environment. And this alkaline environment allows for the precipitation of calcium in the form of calcium phosphate hydroxyapatite. Just remember calcium phosphate, that's good enough for me. So, the OB create an alkaline environment. They lay down a bone matrix, they secrete a protein. Like you ever watch people building stuff and first they put, what's that stuff called? Rebar, or scaffolding, the rebar, and then they pour the cement around it. So they lay down a protein scaffolding, like a rebar. And they create an alkaline environment that causes calcium to precipitate. That means it's going into the bone. It sounds like the opposite, I know. But when calcium precipitates in the bone, that means it's like these osteoblasts are cementing themselves into place with calcium phosphate, with this protein scaffold. And when the osteoblasts are cemented in and stabilized, they're called osteocytes, which just means bone cell. So the osteoblasts lay down this protein matrix. Then they create an alkaline environment that stimulates the precipitation of calcium phosphate. That's what makes your bones hard. If the osteoblasts are yin, the osteoclasts are yang. Osteoclasts are these multinucleated macrophage-like cells. And they move around in the bone and they spit acid, which causes the resorption of calcium phosphate. Reabsorption means it goes back into the blood. So constantly, this is what I call battle of the bones. So constantly these two cell types are laying down calcium, releasing calcium, laying down calcium, releasing calcium, laying down calcium, releasing calcium. But just like yin and yang, they work together. Even though they seem to be doing opposites, if you didn't have a balance between osteoblast and osteoclast, one, you couldn't maintain blood levels of calcium. Because it's the osteoclasts that are constantly releasing calcium from your bone. But if you didn't have the osteoblast, you couldn't build bone because it's the osteoblasts that are constantly taking it back. And again, just like with glucose and just like in sodium, this isn't really happening. You aren't really losing gain, losing gain, losing gain. It's such a precision that you're stable, or you should be stable. We'll talk about conditions when you're not. The other reason that this is important in terms of bone growth, both linear growth and strengthening. Who watched, what was that building called? What a Bear's Lair was and all that. Eshel? No, the student union. What did they do before they built the new student union? They tore it down. So you can't build bone. It takes both of these cells. You can't, right? Because your bone isn't just solid calcium. The osteoblasts and osteoclasts work together the same way the guys did with the, I don't remember the part of the building had the beer in it. The same part of the building where the Bear's Lair was is somebody has to tear it down while somebody's building it up. You can't just keep building and building and building and make a new building. So you're doing this on a daily basis to maintain blood calcium. But you're also doing it as you grow, right? You know that your bones now have a bigger girth than when you were like 2 years old, right? So both of these cells, even though they seem in opposition, they're actually doing the opposite for the same goal. To maintain blood calcium and also to help your bone grow this way. Not linear. We'll talk about linear in a second. There's coordination. But to help your bone grow this way. Yeah, what's that?
So the homeostasis is maintained by the number of cells or
when I say homeostasis, I mean the blood. Blood levels of calcium has to stay the same. The bone is being used as your bank, as you'll see in a second. So the bone is just being used as your reservoir of calcium. So if right now I cut off all your calcium and your vitamin D, you'll start taking calcium out of your bone. Your body will sacrifice your bone to keep you alive.
So they regulate by the number of each cells or
I'll tell you how it's regulated right now. Not by the number of cells per se, but by the relative activity between osteoblasts and osteoclasts. How much you're tearing down versus how much you're building up. Works this way. If blood levels of calcium go up, in the parathyroid gland, there's 4 parathyroid glands. There's an anterior and a posterior pair. And they're on each side of your thyroid gland. People used to think that the thyroid gland was critical for life because if you pull the thyroid gland out, you'll die. Well, the reason you die is because there are 2 pairs of parathyroid hormone glands attached to your thyroid. And you should have learned from George Bentley. The thyroid gland comes from the endostyle, and the parathyroid hormone glands migrate from the pharyngeal pouches and attach to the thyroid gland. You also know, we'll talk about at the end, that the thyroid has embedded in it also, migrated from the pharyngeal pouches, the so-called C cells. It always reminds me of that seashells. The parathyroid glands actually have a calcium receptor. And that calcium receptor, which is coupled to G protein, it's actually related to calmodulin. that calcium receptor suppresses PTH, or parathyroid hormone. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of abbreviations today again. And it's just called that because para means beside, like parallel, because it's the hormone from the glands that are beside the thyroid. If calcium goes up, it's directly sensed by the parathyroid glands, and binding to its receptor, calcium inhibits release of parathyroid hormone. Because what parathyroid hormone does is the following. Parathyroid hormone works through both a G-alpha stimulatory and a G-alpha Q. Right? Q, that's the one that regulates the IP3. Right? Just checking. And what PTH does when it's high is PTH binds. Well, let me tell you what, let's see what you think it does. PTH is going to cause, when calcium is low, PTH is going to go up. And when PTH goes up, it causes the release of calcium from the bone. So which cells do you think it works with?
Osteoclast.
Which one?
Clast.
Who says osteoblast? Raise your hand. Who says osteoclast? Raise your hand. Y'all hear it wrong. It seems like it would, wouldn't it? But what PTH does is, PTH stimulates the osteoblast. I can tell you now, for the rest of the class, say the opposite of what you think the answer is. Because it makes no sense at all. PTH stimulates the osteoblast. And here's how the real working together yin-yang thing, I think, becomes very clear. Because what the osteoblasts do is the osteoblasts release something called rankle. And rankle stands for, I might embarrass myself now. I don't care if you remember it, because I'm not sure if I can remember it. I think it stands for receptor activator, or activating factor of N-kappa ligand. Receptor activator factor of N-kappa ligand. Because it's a soluble factor, it's a ligand for something called RANK, which is the receptor, N-beta kappa. And I don't care if you remember what it means. It's a soluble ligand for RANK, which stands for receptor activator N-kappa. Yeah, I don't care if you remember. But what that does is that stimulates the osteoclast. So PTH works by stimulating the osteoblast, and the osteoblast tell the osteoclast through rankle, which binds to rank, to start spitting acid and release the calcium. So PTH directly regulates calcium release from the bone. Good questions. The other thing that PTH does is it causes calcium reabsorption by the kidney. So it increases calcium channels in the kidney so that you reclaim the calcium, but It also causes phospholuresis. I don't care if you know that. So it's causing you to release. Oh, am I going too fast? I'm surprised because I usually only go fast when I'm excited. I'm just trying to get that nowhere. Who said that? So if calcium is low, PTH will go up. PTH stimulates the osteoblasts, which then secrete rankle. Rankle then stimulates the osteoclasts, which then spit acid. And calcium phosphate is liberated or resorbed from the bone. Like the words sound like the opposite of what they should be. The calcium is resorbed from the bone. The calcium phosphate then goes back into the blood. And normally, that would just go out in the urine, right? Except that PTH on the kidney causes you to resorb the calcium, but to secrete the phosphate. So not only are you taking the calcium back up from the kidney, but it can't go back in the bone anymore because you've gotten rid of the phosphate. Because it has to be calcium phosphate to go back into the bone. So you release the calcium phosphate in response to PTH, stimulating the osteoblast to stimulate the osteoclast via rankle. You release the calcium phosphate, the kidney resorbs the calcium, you you urinate the phosphate out. So now even when the calcium circulates back around, it can't go back into the bone because your body needs it elsewhere. Does that make sense? Okay, there's one more thing. Well, I might do other stuff, but there's one more thing that I'm going to tell you about. Because that's the other thing I know about. Is in the kidney, it increases an enzyme called 1-alpha hydroxylase. Here's what that was. You can figure out what it does. You have my class. I'll tell you. So, you recognize that guy, right? So that's cholesterol. Cholesterol is converted into something called there's a reductase that makes this compound called 7-dehydrocholesterol. 7-dehydrocholesterol is actually a precursor. I just learned this last year. It's actually a precursor to cholesterol. But in the skin, there's a reductase that converts cholesterol back into the 7-dehydrocholesterol. Then, the 7-dehydrocholesterol is converted into this compound called pre-vitamin D3. So here's the start of the lies. Vitamin literally means it's a portmanteau. You guys know that word? I like to use it. It literally means vital mineral. So vitamins are compounds that you can't make that you have to have in your diet. So the first lie is vitamin D3 is not a vitamin. You can make vitamin D3. The second lie is the thing you get from like milk and plants and stuff, that's not really vitamin D3. That's a different, chemically it's a different structured compound. It binds to the vitamin D3 receptor, but it's not really vitamin D3. It's like ergocalciferol or something like that. I'm not gonna make you know the structure. I don't know it. I don't care either way. This is the third big lie. The third big lie is it's no longer steroid because the B ring's broken. This is not enzymatically, there's no enzyme involved. UV light, this all happens in the skin. UV light causes that B ring to break. That's why darker skinned people, like when black people or when Africans first moved up, the Homo sapiens first moved into Europe, that's why there was selection. So hormones shaped your evolution. That's why there was selection for lighter skin, because if you have darker skin, you can't make vitamin D3 properly. So when black people, for example, I don't know, move to Norway, there's problems unless you have a vitamin D3 supplement in the diet, because the darker skin blocks the UV light, and you can't make it. That's how it shaped your evolutionary history. This compound then, this 7-dehydro, then goes to the liver. So here's the other big lie. It's not a hormone because it's not made from anywhere. There's no gland that makes vitamin D3. So it's not a vitamin. It's not a steroid. It's not a hormone. But it shaped your evolutionary history. In the liver, there's an enzyme called 25-hydroxylase. And in the liver, you get this 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. Still not active. Cannot bind the receptor. But in the kidney, PTH regulates this 1-hydroxylase. And that's the active form of vitamin D3, the 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D3. This compound does several things. What? Okay. Then it gets all nutty.
What is the version after the UV light called?
After what?
After the UV light?
This one?
Yeah.
I just see it called pre-vitamin D3. I don't know if it has another name. Oh, I think it's, because this one's called cholecalciferol. The one from plants, I think it's called ergocalciferol. So this, I think is also often called cholecalciferol. But I've also seen it called pre-vitamin D3. But the only active form is this one. So you have pools of 25-hydroxy vitamin D3 circulating in your blood, waiting for PTH to come along. Then a whole bunch of nutty stuff's going to happen. You have a question? Wait, what? So one is 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. The other one is 125. See, there's a hydroxy in the one position. If your eyes are as bad as mine, you can't see it, because I can't see it. Because it's a dashed line, because it's an alpha.
Oh, yeah, sorry, thanks.
See, you can sit up front. You got seats down there. You got to be in the nosebleed. Yeah, so this is the 1 alpha. This is the key to making the compound active. You see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Here's what vitamin D3 does. It does the same stuff as PTH, but here's why. The 1,25-hydroxy form, it stimulates the osteoblast to increase wrinkle. So you see what I mean? Vitamin D doesn't give you strong bones. It actually causes you to lose calcium from your bones. Just like PTH, through its own receptor. So PTH and vitamin D are working through their own receptor. One, vitamin D has no idea how much calcium is in your blood. It's like glucagon, it's only listening to PTH. There's no gland that secretes vitamin D3, and there's no receptor for calcium that regulates vitamin D3, and it does the same thing as PTL. It increases osteoblast to increase wrinkle, just like PTH does. It also, but it's a little bit different on the kidney. It increases calcium resorption at the kidney, but it does something else. Unlike PTH, it increases phosphate resorption as well. So that calcium can be used to go back in the bone. So that's one difference. The other important difference is that PTH cannot do, which is interesting, because remember vitamin D3 has no idea what the calcium levels are. Vitamin D increases intestinal absorption of calcium. That's why it seems like vitamin D3 builds strong bones. Because without vitamin D3, all you can do is recycle the calcium that's already in your body. All PTH can do, even though it's the one that senses calcium, all PTH can do is make you lose calcium from the bone and resorb it from the kidney. Lose it from the bone, resorb it from the kidney. There's no net gain of calcium. So if you're trying to grow, that's why you end up with bow legs or knock-knee. Because if you're trying to grow, there's no way to increase the net calcium. You can only remove it from the bone and resorb it from the kidney. But vitamin D can cause you to take up new calcium. So you have a net gain of calcium. But it still doesn't care about the bone. It's trying to get calcium from anywhere it can, but when you can increase calcium from the diet, you have a surplus. So now you have the luxury to build bone. Because, here's what else vitamin D does. Decreases 1-alpha hydroxylase. So if calcium goes down, PTH goes up. If PTH goes up, 1-alpha hydroxylase goes up. If 1-alpha hydroxylase goes up, vitamin D3 goes up. And then you would continuously lose calcium from the bone, except vitamin D3 shuts down its own synthesis. Vitamin D3 also shuts down its own commander. It decreases PTH. And in the liver, vitamin D3 increases an enzyme called 24-hydroxylase. 24 hydroxylase gives you this compound. Which is inactive and gets secreted. So here's the story. So, if calcium goes down in your blood, vitamin D3 goes up. So if calcium goes down, PTH goes up. Because the calcium suppresses the release of PTH. The calcium receptor, which is related to calmodulin, suppresses the release of PTH. So if calcium goes down, PTH goes up. If PTH goes up, vitamin D3 goes up. And vitamin D3 goes up because PTH upregulates 1-alpha hydroxylase. If vitamin D3 goes up, because of the effects of both PTH and vitamin D3, calcium goes up. Net calcium goes up because it's not only causing you to lose calcium from the bone and resorb it at the kidney, but it's causing you to take it up across the intestine. So net calcium is increasing. But if calcium goes up, PTH goes down because calcium negatively regulates PTH. If PTH goes down, vitamin D3 goes down. Vitamin D3 also goes down because vitamin D3 decreases 1-alpha hydroxylase, decreases PTH, and increases 24-hydroxylase, which deactivates the vitamin D3. Wu wei, it goes on forever until you get menopause. Talk about that in a minute. Questions or comments?
Why haven't you drawn an arrow between vitamin D3 and PTH?
Where?
Because didn't you tell us that vitamin D3 inhibits PTH?
Yes, vitamin D3 does inhibit PTH, correct. Yes. But it'll mess up my infinity sign. Other questions or comments? Because there's more. Of course there is. There's a related calcium receptor in the C cells. Actually, I think it's the same receptor, but it does the opposite. There's a receptor in the C cells that when calcium goes up, the release of calcitonin is increased. Calcitonin is a bone-preserving hormone. In fact, I can't remember the number now because I don't remember things like this, but it's like the most potent hormone known, like a few molecules or something like that. It does some huge amount of stuff. But that was just packed full of information, that statement wasn't. You can like quote that at parties if you want. What cells do you think calcitonin binds to? Who says osteoblast? Who says osteoclast? I told you to say the opposite of what you were thinking. That means you should have rethought it and said the opposite of what you were really going to say the opposite of. Yeah, osteoclast binds to, calcitonin. testosterone binds to and inhibits the activity of the osteoclast. So see, it's just the opposite. So the one that's bone preserving binds to the cells that are actually trying to destroy the bone and inhibit them from being active. We're good? Questions? Ask them because there's more. None? Okay, now here comes, you have to get some more abbreviations. There's one other, let's see, what is the she wants to be named. Yeah, I guess you'd have to do this too. But that kind of messes stuff up. There. See, it just, it's not the same. There's at least one other critical hormone that's not going to be on your calciostat. And again, I think I made those words up. So don't like go to your internship at Alta Bakes or something and start talking about it. Actually, who knows what the other hormone is? Don't be shy. With estrogen. So estradiol plays a critical role. Estradiol in men, testosterone is converted to estradiol in the bone. And as we're going to talk about on Thursday, men don't typically lose reproductive function as early as women do. So men have fewer problems with osteoporosis because testosterone is still available to be converted to estrogen in the bone. In women, in females, estradiol is bone preserving. And in women, it comes from the ovary, so you have circulating estrogen levels that men don't have. In men, it's testosterone and androstenedione that are converted into estrone and estradiol in the blood. So there's a aromatase in the bone. So there's a aromatase expression in the bone that converts androgen to estrogen in men. In women, it's mostly coming from the ovary. Estradiol does several things. Sorry, you got some more abbreviations coming. Estradiol binds the osteoblast and the osteoclast. And the osteoblast wrong. It decreases the release of rankle. So it's decreasing the osteoblast stimulation of the osteoclast. Yeah.
Is the aromatase in the osteoblast?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. It's in the bone somewhere. I don't know which cells it's in. That would, if I had to guess, that's where I would guess, but I don't know. I'll look that up for you. But it's somewhere in the bone. I don't know which cells it's expressed. I've never been asked that. 20 years, I'll look it up. But not only does it increase rankle, decreases. Not only does it decrease rankle, it increases the release of something called osteoprotegerin. And actually, osteo means bone, and protegerin comes from a Spanish word, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, which means protection. Protegerin. You know, I'm like semi-lingual. So osteoprotegerin, I think, which is abbreviated OPT. Osteoprotegerin is a fake rankle receptor. So not only are the cells decreasing the release of rankle, but they're releasing this fake receptor that binds up the rankle so that it can't get to the osteoclast. So Osteoprotectin is a soluble receptor that binds up the rankle, and you already have decreased rankle in the first place. Estradiol also causes, from the osteoblast, causes the release of facile. I've looked now for 20 years to try to figure out what facile stands for. And I'm still not sure. As far as I can tell, it stands for fast ligand. So it's the ligand for a receptor that's in the tumor necrosis factor receptor family.